So, one of the biggest things that I wanted to be able to go through with everyone is what exactly are we trying to orient you to when you do a whole identity profile? When you look at all of this information and the global experience of who you are and what your identity is, what are some of the concepts that I want you to think through? So, the first thing that I want you to do is if you haven't gotten it already, go ahead and go to the website and get the PDF download of the whole identity profile template. I want you to have the blank template to be able to look at as I talk through this with you. Because the main thing that we're going to navigate is there's going to be a section at the top left of the widescreen version, the full legal printout version. And then we're also going to give you a version that's an 8.5 by 11 that it's going to be oriented just a little bit different. Either way that you look at it, I want you to focus in on the part of the template that says natures and scores or ready results. Let me help orient you to some of the language that's on the left-hand side of where it says natures and on the right-hand side where it says scores. So the biggest concept with the whole identity profile is we're trying to give you an insight that you are not a number or a type. So is it important to know your highest number and your lowest number? Yes, everybody feels that you can identify and connect with each of the aspects of each type and you can pull from them and you can lean into them. I agree with that wholeheartedly. What I'm communicating is, do you have an answer as to what your lowest number is and why? Do you have an answer as to what that relationship is in comparison to your highest number and why? Because being able to understand what you are most efficient in is going to help you understand what you speak loudest in, what you are strongest in, what you have a natural capacity to move the fastest in, and what you have a relationship in terms of actual speed, never mind capacity. Versus your lowest numbers and going, man, if I encounter that space in any way, it's not a dialect or a language that I speak on a regular basis. It's not a weight I carry in a regular way. And if I encounter it, I may fatigue at a different rate due to a different relationship with that gift or that capacity than I would my highest number. So if you look at the information that's in that top right-hand side around the legend that starts with the little plus symbol, remember, everything in here has a double entendre and a multiple entendres, meaning they have more than one meaning. They're metaphorical or they're allegorical, okay? So if you look at the plus, not only does it mean that you're seeking positive encounters with these particular high score natures, but you also, because of your lived experiences, are either trying to reframe unhealthy experiences or you're trying to reinforce positive experiences. Either way, based on your lived experiences, those highest numbers give you a higher probability of encountering a life-giving experience. So you need them to be present, but that degree of presence is relative to your personal lived experiences. But also, when we become really efficient in a particular space, we exercise a muscle, we're able to carry a lot of weight and bear a lot of weight or encounter those experiences. We speak that language or that dialect on a regular basis. Our body and our brains are going to budget more resources towards that because we're investing more time and energy into that because we find it more rewarding or more life-giving if we can either reframe it or reinforce it. And because we budget more resources, we charge our body a lower tax rate and a lower interest rate. Just think about when you go into the gym and you first started exercising a muscle, or if you've never been into the gym, just thinking about going into the gym and exercising a new muscle, you're initially going to break a sweat in that space because it's new, uncharted territory. But the more that you do it and the more familiar you are with it and the more practiced you are in it, the easier it becomes. Lower tax rate, lower interest rate. But if you flip that relationship, look at the bottom numbers, those bottom 2 or 3, especially any number that's 10 or lower. And think to yourself, man, I just don't have a lot of lived experience with that space being life-giving. Now, you may not have necessarily negative or traumatic experiences in relationship to those lowest numbers. And oftentimes, many of you may in fact have a specific encounter that was traumatic with something in relationship to those natures. But oftentimes we have to think around a whole identity process. You're either moving towards something that's life-giving and rewarding, you're trying to reinforce that, or you're moving away and avoiding something that is life-threatening that you want to try and remove or minimize or mitigate. So those lowest numbers are really important because that negative or that minus symbol means you may find it painful based on previous encounters, or when you engage in those spaces, it's not something you do on a regular basis. So the fatigability is real and the discomfort with encountering those spaces, even if they're healthy, it's just unfamiliar. And just like doing a workout that you know could be good for you, at first, because it's not something that you do on a regular basis. It's uncomfortable. So that minus means either painful or uncomfortable, which is another conversation for another time about resilience and knowing the difference between discomfort and trauma. So because you're not normally investing your time and energy into these spaces, you're saying, my need is that I don't necessarily have to have these. The degree to which they're absent is actually my preference. So for me personally, I'm lowest in a 5, an 8, and a 9. I don't have a lot of lived experiences with clarity, so I'm comfortable with ambiguity. I don't know what it looks like a lot of times to have a concrete, clear, and decisive course of action. So 5 is not something that I normally chase down. And 8, I'm a big guy, and a lot of people see me in terms of my physical presence and think that I'm really comfortable with challenge and conflict or growth or tension or uncomfortable spaces. And man, I know a lot of people, including both of my brothers, that exercise really a healthy 8 energy. That's not my natural bias. It's something that if I engage in and I try to grow and stretch myself, it's going to be uncomfortable until it isn't. And then for 9, for instance, I have been working actively because, again, it's unnatural for me to engage those lowest numbers, and it's unnatural for me to restrain my highest numbers, because those are things that are default in my particular makeup in terms of that stack of what I'm pursuing and what I'm avoiding in terms of high and low numbers. So when we look at those lowest numbers, because I don't necessarily need them to be present, and in fact, I may be actively trying to have them be absent, when I go to budget resources in my global economy and I try to invest in each of the populations in each of the countries, I'm just not naturally biased towards investing a lot of time and energy into those lowest numbers. So because I budget less resources, it charges me a higher interest rate and it taxes me more. So if you drop me into a conversation where I have to rest following a conflict-based situation that really somebody sat down and clarified where I was missing it, and they did it in a way that felt really unhealthy, that's going to cost me a lot of fuel really, really quickly, because I don't navigate 8, 9, and 5 as efficiently as I do 2, 6, and 3, which are my highest numbers. So that gives you kind of an orientation to go, okay, my highest numbers I'm pursuing, I'm interested in being present, I'm budgeting time and energy towards, because based on my lived experiences, I'm either remodeling or reinforcing something that I had great experiences with that I feel were life-giving and I want to keep present. Or I may have encountered really unhealthy spaces in that particular place, had a childhood wound, had an adverse childhood experience, or had a particular trauma. And because I didn't have a particular exit strategy, I had to learn how to reframe that space if I was going to stay in that space in order to survive. But my lowest numbers, man, I may have never had a positive encounter and it just doesn't feel like something I want to pursue, or I tried and it was wishful thinking to continue trying to get my hopes up to find that oasis moment and keep getting tricked by the mirage of what it could have possibly been if I had actually encountered it. And because of that near miss or that fear of encountering something that doesn't feel tangible, I just let it go as a hope. Or I possibly had some negative experiences where I said, man, I know exactly what it feels like to be hurt in that space. I had an exit strategy, I had a way to get out of Dodge, and I chose not to revisit that particular country, space, place, or experience. So the biggest thing that I want you to take away is if you look at the left-hand side of the nature, we're talking about your natural efficiency. We're talking about your utilization, and we're talking about your survival strategies. Based on your lifetime of experiences, every good and every bad, every positive and every negative experience, and genetically how you came into the world, and the nurture of what that environment looked like, and the discipline-based conditioning in terms of what was reinforced by an external person or space, or what you chose to reinforce in your own life. Your nature, your nurture, and your discipline-based conditioning collectively created the strategies that you see stacked in terms of your profile and your natures that said, if I keep some volume up, some power up, increase my capacity and my response, and increase my speed and move towards, these particular numbers need to have more utilization in order for me to survive, and I need to get more efficient at engaging in them. And the lower numbers said, man, I'm not going to speak at that kind of volume. I'm not going to raise my voice to that kind of space. I'm not going to move at that kind of speed. I don't feel like I have the capacity, so I'm not going to use it. And I'm also looking at it and going, I just don't know what it looks like to be strong in that particular way. So as a result, I've decreased my efficiency, decreased my utilization, and found in order to survive, I may just not need to have that particular nature or essence expressed in myself or within my own environment. So as you orient to this entire space and you look at this map and you start to realize that you have your own personal relative relationship and lived experiences from high to low, I want you to just stop and think. If we know that 95 to 97% of what's happening to us is subconscious, and we see this entire map of our identity profile laid out in front of us, ask yourself a question. Is it possible and is it understandable that those high numbers are going to be difficult for me to stop engaging in, and it's unnatural for me to restrain those areas? And the lowest numbers, it's going to be difficult for me to pursue and engage. And in fact, it may be difficult for me to actively use those spaces. And if you thought about it from an exercise space and an exercise analogy, what would it look like for you to go, man, I got a lot of strength and stamina in this particular space. Maybe I work on form, or maybe I work on being a little bit more specific. I optimize my performance and my health in those top numbers. But those bottom numbers, man, it is really, really unnatural and hard for me to think of ways that I would even engage that space or even know what a healthy version of that space looks like. And again, if you don't know what any of that looks like, I encourage you, those low numbers are really good opportunities to partner with people that can support you in that. If you go into the gym and you're not strong in an area and you don't want to hurt yourself, getting a trainer or getting a coach or getting a spotter or getting a partner is a really good idea. These can be spiritual directors, coaches, counselors, therapists, or a sounding board that's going to be able to give you helpful feedback on what it looks like to exercise a bit in those lowest spaces. And the book is going to give you a lot of information on how to engage each of those particular ways of seeing yourself in each of those natures and energies. But for the sake of this video, just take a deep breath and understand you have access to every number simultaneously. You have the capacity to travel to each space. You have the capacity to see a healthy version of yourself in the future. And if you can't see it for yourself, garnering some support that can support you in finding a way to see a healthier version of you. So pack your bags, figure out a way to travel to each of those areas, and do it in a way that's going to be healthy and helpful. And if you're not sure what that looks like, find support to do that. And I hope this helps to understand a little bit more of orienting yourself to the map and understanding that you are a whole person with a whole identity that is working on not being less broken, but becoming more whole.